Welcome to Game Soup. It's a game design podcast where we throw ideas in a pot and see what's cooking. I'm Chloe Montgomery, and I'm joined, as ever, by the new and improved Kayla Laughs.
Cannot emphasize enough, it won't be Kayla. For context here, I'm looking at getting back into stand-up, even though I can no longer stand.
That's her opening joke.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been thinking about it for a while. Kind of ever since I started using a wheelchair, I've sort of been thinking more like, I feel like I'm getting more material. It's just like, you know, for certain kinds of stand-up, like anecdotes are such a valuable thing, and being a wheelchair user is a real anecdote generator. That's a bit like, there were lots of reasons why I had dropped out of stand-up when I had in the past, and just a lot of those are sort of no longer massively applying. So I'm looking into. I've been thinking though, like if I get really back into the swing of things, like at that point, are all my social media accounts going to be like, yeah. So it's half stand-up comedy, and then half book sell and TTRPGs.
She's going to be doing the really niche circuit of game conventions, just telling jokes about RPGs.
I do think that is probably... I don't know if there are any good jokes you could tell in a stand-up format about RPGs. I'm willing to put a flag in that. I'm like, maybe there's just no good jokes.
Well,
I don't know. I feel like, because to some extent, I feel like telling people about your RPG session in a way where it's not
worse
your...
than hell. Yeah.
I was just going to go, it's adjacent to telling people about your dreams, where it's like, yeah, you maybe could get a stand-up bit out of a dream, but like...
You got to set up for something, but you don't have an actual joke now.
It's not got much grounding in reality, which is going to be a bit of a problem. Though yeah. I have even been thinking, like, if I... Obviously, my first sort of, like, thing I need to look at is, like, how many places can I find to gig? Because loads of the places I used to gig were all in pub basements.
Not ideal.
So, you know, like, but yeah, if I did get more into this, I was like, could kind of like 2-for-1 it on conventions a bit, like, you know, I've just thrown out, like, you know, on the Friday of UK Games Expo, just be like, oh yeah, no, booked to spot at 8 somewhere,
doing a 10-minute set in the lounge, yeah.
That'll, you know, it means all of those, you know, saving the travel money. Very. I will need to figure out the last name though, because I thought we've talked about on this podcast before that Kayla Dice is not a real last name, right?
What? Since when?
I think we have, because ages ago there was an episode where I took a phone call at the end and that was the fade out of the episode. And then when I listened back to it, I was like, why'd you leave in me saying my full fucking legal name?
I can't remember shit.
It was way far back. It's also, so I should, for listeners without this context, because of being a teacher at the time I was starting RPGs, have this pseudonym. And even though I'm no longer a teacher, it sort of feels like rebranding would have been more effort. So I've just been Kayla Dice for a quite a large number of years now. But it would feel weird to take that name back into stand-up, because it's a fake name, because it's an obviously fake name.
I mean, you could do a bit about it being an obviously fake name.
But I feel like the bit I then need to be explaining, okay, so do you know what a TTRPG is?
It's like, I make board games, you know? I make Monopoly.
I miss Monopoly.
Yeah. I'm married to the guy with the mustache and the monocle.
Yeah, like, that's all sort of one thing. The more logical thing is also all of my previous stand-up was under my real name. And, you know, I had some familiarity from people.
Success, yeah.
So it's this case of, like, would it just make more sense to go back? That's then the question of, like, are my social media accounts from that point just like, I have 2 last names? Or would it just be like I allow one to overtake the other?
I think we retcon Dice to be your middle name.
I thought about that before. Yeah, I mean that's what my It's kind of how my legal last name and fake name are integrated on my email. It's like Kayla Dice Macquarie.
Yeah. Oh my God, she said her name. Get her. Dox her. Don't.
I think
dox
I've said
Kayla.
this on. It's in and around other things as well,
Yeah.
but that's so that's been some fun. I've been thinking about and yeah, getting excited for.
Well, yeah. Book your tickets for Kayla's stand-up in a pub attic, I guess.
You understand that the problem with a basement is that the stairs are the. It's not an up or down thing. It's.
I'm just thinking, if it's in the basement, could you not go in the same way that the beer bubbles go in? Like, there's a little hole outside, and you just jump down there. You just put
Well,
down a little mattress, and you.
I guess if it's
land on
jumped
that.
down. I mean, well, this is the thing, though. Some of it probably involves a bit of like research because I say like, oh yeah, everything was in pub basements, but obviously, like more places, there are more lifts than people are aware of. That sounds.
Yeah. There are churches everywhere with those of eyes to see. Yeah.
It's more like there are a lot of places will have lifts that aren't like fully accessible to public. This is more like sort of rare stuff, but like I don't know. Even if I'm going through Waterloo Station and their main lift is dead, they have a storage lift that they show me and people with prams too.
Yeah.
If
no, I get it. Like there's like secret lifts in the back of restaurants for getting stuff up from the stockroom or whatever.
Yeah, stock lifts are a thing often. And then also there are some lifts which people just don't. This is going to sound like it's a criticism of people at large, but I'll also say that I did this before. I was going to say, there are lifts that people who don't use wheelchairs just won't notice. Unless it's relevant. Have you been to Forbidden Planet in London?
Years ago, I couldn't give you any sort of layout of it.
That's fair. And this won't be... But, like... Where I will now buy comics, if I buy them, is Forbidden Planet in London, because it is, I believe, the only comic shop with a lift. And when I mention that to people, they're like, there's a lift in Forbidden Planet? And I'm like, yeah, it's right by the stairs. It's, like, right by the stairs. But in this case, it is a lift that is much more marked out for staff or disabled people.
Yeah.
It's one of those lifts, like a kind of stock thing, where I'm having to press the button the entire time I'm going down.
It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel like it was made this century.
But like a lot of lifts like that are just completely unnoticed. If I like found out that a pub I used to gig at virtually every other week, if I like went there and someone was like, yeah, okay, there's been a lift here this entire time. It's right by the entrance when you walk in. I'd be like, yeah, fair enough. It wasn't relevant to me.
She didn't have the true sight, yeah.
I'll also probably be spending some time thinking on material. Let's talk about games, though.
Yeah, it's a game design podcast, ostensibly. You sent me some ideas for Supin, so give me some.
Yeah, I'll give you the second one, which is sort of more simpler. I, on Saturday, went to see at the IMAX Throne of Blood, old film by Akira Kurosawa, which is a retelling of Macbeth in feudal Japan, recast as samurai with Toshihiro Mifune in the lead role. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of Kurosawa.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, samurai, that sounds like his bag.
Yeah, it was there was an introduction by the...
By Kurosawa?
No, not by famously dead man Kurosawa. It was by the curator of the British Museum's exhibition on samurai. Anyway, Throne of Blood is a very good film. I've actually seen it before when I was maybe 16, 17, and watched it again. I think Macbeth is my favourite. It's one of my favourite Shakespeare's. It's good. Macbeth's good.
It's the one with the witches, right?
Yeah, the witches, the murder, the outdamned spot. And Throne of Blood, I should say, is, like, there's both the fact of, like, yeah, it's transplanted to Japan, but also it's, like, it's not taking the language of Shakespeare because it's all done in Japanese, and so
Yeah.
some plot events are different. One I found really interesting. Well, there's a couple of interesting things. Some is like just like some of the dialogue about how the Lady Macbeth figure is convincing her husband to kill his lord is different. Where like she makes this appeal, which is like, well, your mate Miki, who is the equivalent of Banquo, will probably tell the general about that prophecy, and then he'll get paranoid and he'll kill you. So you should strike first. You need to preemptively attack
Yeah.
a thing that will make you a moral and good person. But like that's interesting. Once, yeah, she's also the one who like encourages him to then kill Mickey rather than like naming Mickey's son as an heir. Versus like in Macbeth, where actually like the Banquo murder is the one Macbeth does without his wife, and that's kind of maybe the start of them splitting apart. But
Yeah.
I was actually thinking like, oh, there is kind of this. The prophecy at the end gets changed a bit too. I won't go through just all of these lists, but it's interesting seeing a story that like has enough maybe sort of iconography that it can be resistant to sort of individual shifts. And so the message I sent you was just Macbeth game, maybe BOB.
Yeah, it's not a full idea. I'm thinking you've got a game about rival states. Well, maybe not even rival states, like people vying for the throne or whatever sort of head of community it could be. It could just be like a bunch of school kids who are telling on each other to get the school council seat.
Yeah.
There's like roles for like, oh, I'm going to be the tricksy, influencer, as played by Macbeth's wife in the Lady Macbeth. Sorry, a famously named character in the original, and yeah, there's certainly an idea here.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking is it's maybe an aspect of like, oh, Macbeth. Like, I think a lot of like the act stuff is actually quite sort of interestingly set. I feel like, I'm thinking of who are the sort of core characters who would then be interesting people to explore, and I'm like, oh well, there's like Macbeth himself, Lady Macbeth. Then there's also Banquo, who also gets given prophecy items and has to decide how they interpret that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I say, like, BOB maybe, but I also think this probably does have a kind of harder act structure, where there's this thing of, like, oh, in this act, these two characters are going to receive this prophecy.
Yeah, I think it's like a 1 or 2 session BOB. It couldn't be like an open-ended thing. I think, like, you have systems like generating prophecies at the start of each act. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for this game to try and be open-ended, because
no, it is
it's source material.
A limited
it's not
story. Yeah.
I'm also increasingly less interested in open-ended games as a designer, but that's maybe just a me thing.
Yeah, I mean, we did capsule games last week, but yeah, I mean, having reread Yuzabas recently, like the episodic thing is like, yeah, it's this one 30-minute or whatever bit of play, and then yeah, you can carry on with these characters, but it's not going to be the same story. It's just the same characters transplanted into a different story. Like, I kind of like that.
Yeah. I think, like, there's lots of interesting stuff I feel you can do to both have a game that is going to, that has, like, a lot of scope for continuing play, while also most of the individual stories, or not stories, but, like, gameplay things are their own self-contained unit. But, like, yeah, I think, like, it has this act thing, because obviously this has to plausibly end with like a fall of the thing. Oh, then the interesting thing is the witch characters. Like, how is that being presented here? I think, there's maybe something to do with, like, I guess how you're playing out setting elements. Like, in terms of setting elements that I think of some immediately come to mind are like, okay, the witches would plausibly make sense as a half setting element, half character thing because of how they are.
Witches is a setting element that is played by everybody, where like, oh, one person says something and then the next person along says another thing, and it's like the different witches butting in. Like we did a similar thing for the dragon in Cobalt Country, where it's like, yeah, they are this booming, terrifying, impossible creature, and everyone plays it.
Yeah, I think the witch is something you definitely have to do something unique with. I like the idea of it, like something that maybe emphasizes an unknowability. You shouldn't. No one should fully ever really get an idea of they're like, oh, I understand the interior worlds of this character. That's oh, then that's not working. But other elements I was thinking as I was like, oh, there's maybe an interesting thing if England is a setting element. England obviously is not super relevant in Macbeth, except for the fact that they're where all of the characters flee when they escape Macbeth to start, preparing to revolt. So that's this sort of who is this external oppositional force who's going to, plausibly where other things are going to cluster around. There was some other stuff. I was just thinking like Macbeth is a very kind of resilient story. And obviously I feel like it can feel a bit silly to maybe try and do anything about a Shakespeare because there's stories that are very influenced by their characters. But I think a slightly interesting thing about this game would be seeing how people make different character choices. Like if someone who is playing the Banquo equivalent decides like, oh yeah, I don't think I'd ever trust Macbeth, and maybe I'm the guy who's going to in fact strike first instead of the other way around. Or
you could certainly play a lot with, oh well, I know the original story, so I'm going to act on that. But in doing that, it could be part of the prophecy. Like,
it's an interesting because I feel like as much as I've said, oh, this is a Macbeth game, I feel when you write the game, I don't think you self-describe that way in the text of the game.
Yeah, you say it's influenced by Macbeth, but it's not the game for playing
maybe some
Macbeth.
Acknowledgement. You wouldn't write a playbook name as if it was like, oh, this is the Macbeth character, even though it's like reading it closely enough, it's like, oh yeah, that's what this is doing. But I just think...
Yeah, it would be the noble, the influencer, the betrayed, whatever.
I don't want to put a play group in mind that they need to retell a story versus... but like, I don't know. This is just all thoughts that came to me while watching Throne of Blood at the IMAX, because I like going to the IMAX. It's cheap for me.
I'm thinking this could be a good series because, like, you could have like a Romeo and Juliet and like two different houses that you build as a group, and then you build your characters within the groups. Like you have your Romeo and Juliet characters, but then you also have like your Mercutios and whatever.
Yeah, I think in theory, if I explored this game more, there's then maybe an interesting thing about just a lot of Shakespeare stories, specifically the bigger, iconic ones, where they've got like this kind of almost like narrative weight. Even like the interesting thing about Shakespeare is more the language. Like his actual narrative events are more often taken from other stuff, or like histories or other kind of retellings. But like some of the Henry IV Part 1 doesn't have a kind of like narrative weight in consciousness that I could make a Henry IV Part 1 game and not expect people to be confused. But Romeo and Juliet does. To a certain extent, Hamlet does as well.
Yeah, your iconic ones that people can list off the plot in their head, yeah.
I think like there's definitely a world where like the system gets figured out for this quite well in terms of like, oh, what do the setting elements look like and how are they? Because I think setting elements are like one of the most sort of interesting things in belonging outside belong games, but they're often the sort of difficult thing. And I think that's why I'm always very interested in how different games...
Yeah, they require the most designing, it feels.
Yeah, I think some games just sort of take setting elements and they're like, quite straightforward to maybe how the setting elements in Dream Askew Dream Apart are, whereas others go in much more sort of like further afield direction. But I think the setting elements probably are quite important. But if it was figured out, I think there's maybe an interesting thing about this Shakespearean pseudo-theatricality. I think maybe that's an area I'm just sort of interested in a lot lately, is a sort of pseudo-theatricality to a game, you know? 2 senses of the word play. I'm a
Wow.
wanker.
She's done it. Thank you for listening to Game Soup.
Bye bye bye!